The first missiles don't announce themselves. There's no warning siren, no dramatic countdown. Just a sudden violent rupture in the assumption that tomorrow will look anything like today. And what we're seeing here is not a crisis beginning, but a system finally giving way under pressure that has been building for years. Because across the Taiwan Strait, the tempo is no longer theoretical, it's operational. Chinese aircraft are already pushing past thresholds that once triggered diplomatic protests. Warships are holding station where patrols used to pass through, and the language has shifted, not quietly and not subtly, with official statements from Beijing no longer talking about patience, but about timelines and inevitability. And that word matters because once inevitability enters doctrine, escalation stops being a risk and becomes a plan. And the core reality behind any China-Taiwan conflict isn't a single invasion day or dramatic beach landing, but a slow, grinding collapse of deterrence happening in full view of the world. The moment when all sides realize the cost of backing down now outweighs the cost of moving forward. And the numbers tell the story. In a single year, Taiwan tracked more than 1,700 PLA aircraft entering its air defense identification zone. Not a spike, but a baseline. In some months double the year before, not signaling, but conditioning, training pilots, crews, and command structures to operate under constant contact. And that's not even the worst part, because air activity is only one layer, and beneath it sits the maritime picture, where the People's Liberation Army Navy now fields the world's largest fleet by hull count, with more than 370 ships, over 140 major surface combatants, and more than 60 submarines optimized for the shallow, acoustically complex waters of the Taiwan Strait. And operationally, this is devastating for any defender because Taiwan's coastline is narrow, its ports are limited, its resupply routes predictable, and in a high-intensity conflict, every hour matters and every ship delayed compounds the problem, and China knows this, which is why the emphasis isn't just on firepower, but saturation. Overwhelm the sensors, overwhelm the interceptors, overwhelm decision-making. This is network-centric warfare, and Taiwan's network is under constant strain. We'll come back to that. Because Beijing's defense white papers no longer describe reunification as a distant aspiration, but as a mission to be completed within the planning cycles of current leadership, and for Xi Jinping, delay risks internal erosion while action risks external war, but doing nothing is no longer an option, and that's the trap. And Taiwan didn't set it, because Taiwan's importance isn't symbolic, but systemic, producing roughly 60% of the world's semiconductor foundry output and over 90% of advanced chips that power precision weapons, radar systems, satellites, and artificial intelligence. And remove Taiwan from the equation, and the global military balance doesn't tilt, it fractures. This isn't a one-off supply shock, but a structural collapse, and the curve is bending. Because where exercises once were time-bound and constrained, they now encircle the island, cross the median line, and simulate blockades rather than landings. And that distinction matters, because blockades don't require the political commitment of invasion. They strangle instead, and psychologically, that pressure without release is corrosive for Taiwan's population, destabilizing for markets and paralyzing for allies, and that's where the hidden reality emerges. This conflict is designed to begin with paralysis, not bombs, with undersea cables as early targets since Taiwan relies on a small number of critical submarine cables that have already been severed under suspicious circumstances near Chinese vessels, officially accidents but operationally rehearsals. We'll come back to that. Because air defense follows the same logic, Taiwan fields advanced systems, but interception is about volume, not capability, and China fields thousands of missiles within range, and the numbers tell the story. Because even a 10% leak rate means power grids, fuel depots, and command centers are hit. Not to destroy Taiwan outright, but to make sustained defense unsustainable. And for the United States, this is a nightmare scenario layered with obligation and ambiguity, reaffirming commitments while preserving uncertainty. But Beijing is leaning into that ambiguity. And history shows why, because Chinese military modernization has shifted from continental defense to near-seas control to anti-access denial, keeping adversaries out long enough for facts on the ground to harden. And compare today to 5 years ago, and the change is unmistakable. Expanded rocket forces, operational hypersonics, carrier groups integrated into joint doctrine. The curve is bending and Taiwan's margin for error is shrinking. And you need to understand this because this isn't just about hardware but psychology. Convincing a population resistance is futile before the first shot is fired through daily incursions, economic pressure, and diplomatic isolation, each manageable alone but corrosive together and operationally. This is devastating, and that's not even the worst part because escalation control is almost non-existent. Once kinetic action begins, pathways multiply, cyber attacks spill into civilian systems, satellites are targeted, GPS degrades, shipping reroutes, insurance rates explode, and this stops being regional and becomes global, with Japan's bases becoming frontline assets, Australia's supply chains stretching thin, Europe facing another systemic shock, and China's leadership understands time is both asset and liability, demographics tightening, growth slowing, readiness peaking now, not later. Taiwan's defenses improving, alliances tightening, the window narrowing, which is why rhetoric has hardened, and official statements now frame external interference as the primary obstacle, preparing domestic audiences for confrontation beyond the strait. We'll come back to that because Taiwan's defenders are pursuing denial through mobility, dispersion, and resilience. Smart and necessary, but fragile under sustained pressure. And every day without resolution adds strain. And this isn't frozen, it's accelerating, with exercises now announced in advance, narratives shaped, outcomes framed, and the numbers tell the story again as regional defense spending surges. Japan doubles its budget. The Philippines expands base access. The United States restructures Indo-Pacific forces, and these aren't reactions but preparations, which Beijing interprets as confirmation, locking in inevitability, because once all sides act as if conflict is coming, de-escalation space collapses, every move looks preemptive, every pause temporary, and for Xi Jinping backing down now isn't stability but loss of control. And that's the hidden reality. This conflict isn't driven by a single decision, but by momentum, by systems rewarding escalation and punishing restraint, by narratives that leave no room for compromise, and you're watching it unfold in real time. Because the question isn't whether a China-Taiwan conflict would change the world, but whether the world can absorb the change. Because once the first irreversible step is taken, there is no reset button, no return to status quo. Supply chains reroute permanently, alliances harden, military doctrines rewrite themselves, and the situation crosses a threshold that fundamentally changes the trajectory of global conflict forever.